Are you a current or future physician assistant wanting to learn more about finances? Then join me on this journey to become a PA the FI way. Hi, my name is Kat, and I'm a practicing certified physician assistant who will be your host. It took me 5 years after I started practicing medicine as a PA to thoroughly dive into my personal finances after I discovered the concept of financial independence. I want to use what I have learned to help you avoid some of the financial mistakes that I have made while sharing some of the financial wins that I have had along the way. Join me as we discuss financial strategies to guide you to becoming a physician assistant on the way to financial independence. Welcome back, everyone, to the PA the FI Way podcast. I'm your host, Kat, and thanks again for joining me for the show for this week. On today's episode, I want to expand upon the most recent episode where I talked about how when you are changing jobs, you have 4 options of what you can do with your 401k plan. So if you haven't already, go ahead and listen to the most recent episode. So before I talk a little bit more about 401ks today, especially applying to if you are considered a highly compensated employee within your workplace, I also wanted to share something that was kind of funny that happened quite timely with that most recent episode too. So as many of the longtime listeners know, my husband and I both have very different innate money habits and spending habits. He is more of the spender and I am more of the saver, which means that I'm definitely way more into this whole financial thing than he is. Well, we have talked before about how he didn't have a 401k from previous jobs to still have invested or potentially considering rolling over to other past jobs or things like that. His joke is he has a 401 not okay, so feel free to use that joke if you need to make someone laugh about your finances. In fact, way back before we ever met and he was a young single guy, he will tell you that he actually cashed out his 401k, which is one of your 4 options that you have, but it's the least recommended one, right? And he spent it on a couple of things that he thought were very important at the time, including tires and a lift kit for his truck. My friends who are listening who know my husband well will laugh at that because he still loves his trucks for sure. Well, let's circle back to what happened in the past few days. We got a notification in the mail from a company that he used to work with many, many, many years ago. And the letter was actually from what appears to be a brokerage company. And it's telling him that he actually still has the 401k through his former employer with this brokerage company. So we are going to do a little bit more digging together, making sure that it's actually legit. It looks like it's legit to me, but doing a little bit more digging to confirm that and to see if we want to keep it within the brokerage company. I talked about this last week about how you have to consider, do you like the brokerage company and do you like your investment options and are you okay with the fees that are associated with your investments to decide if you want to keep your 401k with your previous employer or not. Well, all of these years, he had kept it with his previous employer because he had forgotten about it. And we talked in the most recent episode as well about how that is a risk of leaving your 401k with your former employer if you do decide to switch companies, is that you might end up forgetting about it. And not all former employers can or would or be good at tracking you down. We don't really know how they necessarily got our address, except I know that the place that you live, your primary residence, truthfully can be found pretty easily with your first and last name online, so perhaps that was it. But anyway, I thought that you all would appreciate a real life example about how you can think you're having your finances under control and that you're learning and growing, which is all true, but you can still make mistakes currently, or your past mistakes might pop up in life. And this mistake was actually a pleasant surprise because, again, it was what appears to be extra investments that we weren't quite aware of. So that's pretty great. So many of you might have only had a handful of jobs where you know for sure exactly what happened to your old retirement accounts within those jobs. But many people in healthcare do tend to bounce around. And if you have had several jobs, I really encourage you to rack your brain or try to even reach out to your old company's HR. Maybe they can look it up for you and things like that to do a little bit of research. However, I want to share a little bit about a tool that I have read about. Now, this is not a sponsorship or an ad or anything like that. I'm just mentioning it, and I have not used it, so I don't have personal experience with it. But a lot of the financial independence or personal finance people that I follow on Instagram have recommended this service, and it's called Capitalize. And it is a service that can help you roll your old 401ks into an IRA as well. So you just tell them the information that you know, and they can help you do those types of things for you. It also looks like they can help you find your old 401ks, and just quickly researching online, it looks like they probably use your social security number to have that information to help run a report and see if they can find other 401ks for you. So again, perhaps if you have bounced around with many jobs and aren't quite sure, maybe you want to consider a service like Capitalize, or at least do a little bit more research about them and see if they can help you. All right, so now that I have shared that story, let's move on to the topic for today's episode. And in today's episode, I want to talk about a really interesting and unique thing that can happen when you are considered a highly compensated employee, or HCE, through your company, and you contribute to a 401k. And what triggered this conversation was that this actually happened to a few of my friends and former coworkers. And I just wasn't really aware of this, even though, again, I have been talking about finances for a few years now. As a listener, perhaps you are aware of this. Maybe it's even happened to you. But my suspicion is that actually many of you have not heard of this yet. So that's why I want to share the information with you and just make you aware of it, so that if it does happen to you, you're not so confused and don't really understand it. So first of all, you might be thinking the term highly compensated employee, or HCE, seems like a really subjective, broad term, right? You might feel like a highly compensated employee if you make a really good amount of money, but it's not really what you might think that it means. So let's first define what this means. The IRS defines HCEs, or highly compensated employees, as someone who owns more than 5% of a business, and it looks like that is at the time during the year or the preceding year, regardless of the amount of money that they received as compensation, or for the year of 2022 received more than $135,000 in compensation and was in the company's top 20% in pay. But as with many tax things, that number can increase from year to year. So in 2023, that amount increases to $150,000. So a lot of PAs make less than $150,000, but a lot of PAs make well over $150,000. Same with many other healthcare professionals out there. So the 401k plan contributions of an HCE can actually be limited by the IRS. For the year of 2022, the amount that you generally could contribute to a 401k was $20,500, and in 2023, it's now $22,500. If you are age 50 and older, it was an extra $6,500 in 2022, and it's an extra $7,500 in 2023. So, on surface level, when that's the contribution limit, meaning the max that you can contribute, once you get your finances under control, learn how to budget, learn how to save, but very importantly, understand and learn how to invest your money, you very well might want to contribute the max amount to your 401k, right? Especially if you are a high earner. Well, unfortunately, you might not actually be able to contribute up to the contribution limit if you are a highly compensated employee, if certain things happen with your company, and I'm going to explain that in a moment here. So I used to think that you could contribute up to the limit because it's the limit, right? I didn't realize and understand that it can actually be nuanced depending upon your company. So it's really interesting and weird to think about, but I will explain it for you. So the reason why this exists is because the IRS wants to make sure that highly compensated employees don't actually benefit more than the other employees when it comes to the taxable income lowering advantage offered by the pre-tax contributions. So they run a non-discrimination test to make sure that it's not only highly compensated employees contributing to their 401ks and contributing enough money and using 401ks more than non-HCEs or non-highly compensated employees. It's kind of a fair play, non-discriminatory regulation, I suppose. So the IRS requires all 401k plans to perform the non-discrimination test every year. And it separates the employees into the two groups, the non-HCEs and the HCEs. So this is the key. If the average contributions of the HCEs to the 401k plan that's sponsored by the employer are more than 2% higher than the average contributions of the non-HCEs, the plan would fail the non-discrimination test as a general rule of thumb. Also, contributions by HCEs collectively can't be more than 2 times the percentage of other employee contributions. It's important to keep in mind too that the compensation number is not just your salary, but can also include other pay like bonuses and things like that too. So if a company fails to meet the non-discrimination test and the IRS thinks that there's discrepancy, then the IRS requires the company to decrease the discrepancy between the HCEs and the non-HCEs. And if an employer refuses or fails to correct a discrepancy, then the plan may lose its tax qualified status. And then all contributions would have to be returned to the employees that contributed money into their account. Additionally, the employer or workplace could have other consequences, both financially and tax consequences. However, how the company can make this right on a year-to-year basis if they fail to meet the non-discrimination test is that they have one of two options. The first option is that they can make additional contributions on behalf of the company into the non-HCEs 401k accounts to help balance and make their accounts a little closer to the HCE amounts. I'm sure many of you are thinking the exact thought that I had. What company do you know of out there that would actually make more contributions to their 401k plan than the potential match that they have already offered? That's usually not going to happen. Maybe it could happen for maybe some growth companies that they are identifying, oh, wow, I guess their match wasn't enough, or I want to match more to encourage more of our employees to contribute to their 401k. Or they had this really large surplus and they want to be very kind and generous and provide more 401k contributions on behalf. But generally, the pessimist in me is thinking, it's probably pretty unlikely to happen, right? So what is the other thing that can and would happen? Well, the brokerage company can actually make distributions from its retirement plans to the HCEs, essentially forcing them to take some of the money that they have already contributed towards their 401k for the year and force them to take out the money. And like I said, this actually happened with some friends and PAs that I know that I actually used to work with. And they got a letter with a check in the mail that said, here you go. This is the amount back that you had to take back for the year. And of course, this happens right around tax season. So it's actually happening in the following year of what they were contributing for. But what's really interesting about the money that they give back to you too is that it's also taxable income. And that's interesting because part of the reason why you were trying to contribute and max out your 401k was to help reduce your overall tax burden. But technically you haven't been taxed yet on that amount, so it does make sense that you would get hit in taxes later. So it's a little bit of a logistical and tax nightmare for some, depending upon the amount that they get. Again, I have not personally experienced this situation yet. I had actually left my former place of employment in the fall, so I didn't quite have a chance to max out my 401k for that year before doing so. And then in March and April the following year is when they started talking about, what is this check that I received about my 401k plan? And it's telling me that I contributed too much. And I thought that I contributed the limit that I was allowed. So it caused a lot of confusion and again, sparked some interesting conversation and research. So there are other retirement savings options for HCEs that we have talked about, but I will briefly cover here as well in case you do want to contribute more than what you can as an HCE. So if you recall, you can open an IRA and contribute to a Roth IRA. You can technically do a traditional IRA, but then you couldn't do a backdoor Roth IRA in the future if that's the case. If you are a high income earner and earn over the threshold to contribute to a Roth IRA directly, you might have to contribute through the backdoor Roth IRA. You could also open an HSA, a health savings account, which are one of my favorite investing accounts because of the triple tax advantage. Or you can open a taxable brokerage account as well if you want to invest more, but it doesn't really help you on your taxes at all. So please remember that there are other ways that you can also invest your money outside of your 401k or in addition to your 401k if that's what you would choose to do. I hope that you found this information interesting. Again, it may or may not affect you, or maybe it has affected you, or you might run into it in the future. So I just want you to keep this information in the back of your mind. Or if there are friends, family members, or colleagues that run into this, you can point them to this episode and say, hey, this could be a good resource to try to explain what in the world this is and how this happened to you as a highly compensated employee. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen today and to expand upon your financial knowledge to help build wealth for your future. And I would absolutely love if you were to leave a rating and a review on the podcast player that you are listening to this on. Otherwise, I will see you back here soon. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you decide to continue to join me along this journey of becoming a PA the FI way. Please take a moment to press the subscribe button on the platform that you are listening to this on, but more importantly, consider sharing with another current or future PA that could benefit from the information that we reviewed in this episode. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Until next time.